Okay. With the
Thank you.
Eibishter's help, today's daf is Masechta Baba Metzia, daf Ayin Zayin. And we are starting from daf Ayin Vovim at Bays, about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 lines from the bottom. Tana Kamei Derav. So what we're discussing over here is the subject of, let's say you hire a worker, okay, and they show up to the job, and then there's nothing.
And the different price.
Yeah, they gave a price. They showed up to the job, and turns out there's nothing to do. So what's the din? Yeah, the Brisa said on top, "Hasoiches umnam," you hired workers, right? Um, but if the hired workers and they went to the field, they showed up for the job, and they didn't find any wheat to carry or something like that. You hired them to transport wheat, or you hired workers to plow the field, and they found that the field you can't plow. The Brisa says, "Noisen lehem shchara mishalem." You gave them you give them a full wage. You hired them, and they showed up, but you give them a discount. You give it them like oisem alocha liyashibata. You don't have to pay a full wage because they're not working. A little bit of a discount. You pay a little bit less because there's nothing to do, but you have to pay them. So the Gemara says like this: Tana Kamei the Rav. A Bryce of Tana taught in front of Rav. Noisen lehem shchara mishalem. You give them the full wage. So Rav understood that when the workers show up and there's nothing to do, you have to pay them a full wage. Amalei, Rav was upset. Chavivi Amar, I had an uncle, my uncle Reb Chia, who used to say, Ili ha'nahava, if it was me, loy hava yahavina len elikapoyel batal. I would not pay the full wage because there's nothing for them to do. I would pay only the discounted wage, like a poyel batal. But Amrit, you're saying in the
Right.
you have to give them the full wage. Allah Kataini, we learned in a brisa somewhere else. You can't compare somebody who has to load a wagon to somebody who just has an empty wagon. Oisa malacha to somebody who does work, to somebody who just sitting around doing nothing. So Rav understood from the Talmud that taught him the brisa that the brisa only says you pay him a full wage. Answers the Gemara, loisima kamai. The Talmud that was saying this brisa in front of Rav didn't finish his sentence. He was going to agree with Rav that yes, you don't have to pay the full wage because there's nothing to do, but you pay a discounted wage of Yoshev Batal. But Ika Damri, this gets interesting. Sima kamei. That Rav, the person finished. He said the brisa, and he taught Rav and said that in case the workers show up, you pay him a discounted wage. So Rav was still upset about that. V'hachi kama, Rav says, Chavivi ama, Chavivi said, I hava ana, if it was me, lo yahave havnin le klal. I wouldn't give the workers a dime. They're not working, so there's nothing to give them. But amrit kapoyel bata, and you telling me that you should get a discounted wage? I mean, that makes no sense. They're not working, so they should get nothing, zero. So the Gemara says, Alakashya. Then if that's the case, but the Brisa says that when workers show up and there's nothing to do, they get a discounted wage, but not that you can walk away and say not pay them at all. So how do you reconcile Reb Chia saying that you don't have to pay them at all to the Brisa? So the Gemara says, like Kasha, it's not difficult. Ha desire la'are arse. What the place where you don't have to pay them at all is because when the workers came the night before, they scouted out the place and they saw that if they're going to show up the next day, there's nothing going to be. They don't have. There's nothing. No work to be done. And so therefore, they showing up to work doesn't obligate you to pay. They knew about that there's delays or whatever. They on their own should have not have showed up to work. So if they show up to work, you don't have to pay them at all. But the prices that says that you have to pay them a discounted rate, but you have to pay them something because they showed up to work. They didn't investigate the land the night before. The night before they didn't see what's going on in the land. Because this is like what Rava said. Rava is the same idea. Hayman the Agir Agir Lerivka. A man hired workers to make ditches, right? Right to let's say to plow a field. Va'asa mitre and where rain came, umal yamaya, and filled up the place with water. Now you can't plow the field. Okay, so rain came. Well, everybody knows rain is coming. If the workers investigated the night before and they saw that, it looks like rain, so then they shouldn't have showed up to work the next day. So therefore, we go to Amabeit, Psei de Bailam. We go to Ein Zayin Mo'alef, Psei de Bailam. It's a loss for the workers, and therefore you don't have to give them anything because we can tell them that it's your mazel that caused the rain to happen. In other words, you're right. The owner really wanted to hire you if it wasn't going to rain. But now that it rained, it's your loss. But loy urta, they didn't investigate the land the night before. So now it was up to the owner to tell them not to show up. And the owner probably forgot to tell them not to show up. And they showed up anyway. So psei the balabais, then the balabais has to incur a loss. The yahav lehu kapoil batal has to pay them at least a discounted wage. Another thing that Rava said. Rava is going to tell us three more things. The Amar Rava said, Hai man the oige agure lidalva. Man hired a worker to let's say to hose his field, to water his field with a hose. Okay. Also Mitra, and then all of a sudden rain came. So we don't need this guy anymore. You don't need this guy manually hosing down a field. So who loses out? Say the the worker loses out. You don't have to pay him. Because if he stopped working half a day, that's it. You only pay him half a wage because the rain came, and it's his muzzle that the rain came. Also Nahara, but let's say there was like a river in the area that overflowed.
The river overflowed with water.
Water flooded the field, and
Yeah.
Excuse
therefore,
me, how could we say a couple things ago that the workers should have been able to see that it was going to rain, and therefore there's an opinion you don't even have to pay them or not as much because they should have known and they came anyway. But then you say that you hired someone to water a field and it rained, and that's not your fault.
we got so
Well,
in the middle of the
either you could see it's going to rain or you can't see it's going to rain. Which one?
here it's a little different. He hired the workers to hose the field, okay, and
Right.
let's say to hose down the field would take the 8 hours. After 3 hours, rain came. So now does the owner have to pay him for the time that they're not going to work because we don't need them to hose the field anymore?
But why can't we say he should have known it was going to rain? He shouldn't have hired him to begin with.
Well,
Just like the people were supposed to know the night before it was going to rain.
no, but I guess it rained the night before. In the previous case, it actually rained the night before.
Oh,
And
I
therefore,
thought you meant they saw that rain was coming.
right? No, I think how to say yes. They saw probably here. Look at you see on my screen 2 lines Yardu Geshamim Balayla. You're right. I should have pointed that out. In the previous case, they saw that it was raining at night. See,
Okay.
here it didn't rain at night. In the middle of their job, it rained.
Okay. All right. That's different. Okay.
Yama Rava said. So if 1 second, if the river overflowed and it flooded the field, so then say that the balabais, then the loss is the palabais, because the workers don't know the times that the river overflows, but the balabais knows that about it, and therefore it was like expected this to happen. So the balabais hired them anyway. He just wanted to get it done quickly. So therefore, v'yavle kapayel batal. He has to give it to them like a worker. You have to pay them something, a discounted rate. V'yama Rava said, "Hi man, the oiger oiguri lidalva." Again, he hired somebody to hose down his field. Upasek nahara v'pal. And all of a sudden, the water well, the source of water where you're hosing down the field, ran dry. Maybe other people were using it, whatever. It ran out. The pasuk, if it's a shock that this happened, so pseidid the payala, the workers lose out. Again, if it's something that was not expected, the workers suffer and they don't get paid the full day's work. Ovid the pasuk, but if it was something that could have been expected, and every ibnei masa, so if the workers are from the city and they also knew that this thing, the water source will dry up, say that the workers lose out because they understood that this is the risk, that this was going to happen, that their source of water where they're hosing the field is going to dry out. La b'nei masa, but if they're not from this city, pseidid the balabayas, then it's the loss of the owner who hired them, because it's something that the workers didn't expect and was a risk that they didn't take on when they signed on for the job. You have to pay them for the full day. V'amar Rava, Rava said, "Hayman da'age agurel avidite." A guy hired somebody for a job. Ushlim avidite biyag avidite palyom, and the guy did a quick job, and he hired him for the job, a certain specific job, for a whole day. And the guy finished the job in a half a day. So isle avidite dinichele mimine yahovle inamid kavasi mafkid lahu. In other words, you don't want to send him home. You paid him for the full day, and the job that you had for him, he finished it in a half a day. So if you have another work for him that's easier to be done, or it's the same type of work, you can continue working with him, because you basically are paying him the wage for the day, although you gave him a specific job, but he finished that job in a half a day. So give him another thing to do. But if you give him something more difficult than what he was originally hired to do, then you can't do that. The noisin lehem schar mishalem. You have to pay the full wage. In other words, that if they finish the job in a half a day, right, and you have nothing else to do with them, you have to give them the second half of the day, but you don't have to pay them the full price because they're not doing anything. You get a little discount for the second half of the day. Says so the Gemara said, wait, so the Gemara first said you have to pay them 100% for the second half of the day. So the Gemara asks, why should you pay them for 100% for the second half of the day? They're not working the second half of the day. Their job finished in the first half of the day. So for the second half of the day, you should pay them a discounted rate. Answers the Gemara, Kikama Rava, when did Rava say that you pay a full wage, even though you have nothing for them to do, is Bachshlushe de Mechoiza. There are certain, like, people of Mechuza, like that's in the city of Mechuza, which was the city of Rava. There were people who are really built to carry things always, and when they sit idle, actually their muscles become flat or whatever, and they become weak. So you're actually causing them a loss by not having a job for them to do for the rest of the day. So because now they become weaker workers, okay? And therefore, Rava said that these type of people, if the job finished in a half a day because you underestimated the job probably, and they finished it in a half a day, and you hired them for the day, for the rest of the day, you have to pay them a full wage. New Gemara, going back to the Brisa. Amal Mar. We learned before the Shita of the Tanakama. The Tanakama held that if you hire a worker and he works, and the job is let's call it eight dinners, right? 8 dinners, and they quit in the middle of the job. They walked off the job, and right at the halfway mark. What should you pay them? So let's say to complete the job will now cost you 6 dinner. In other words, the second half will cost you 6. You estimated it cost you 4. So you can't deduct from their wages. That's what the Gemara says. You can't deduct from their wages because they quit on you. Why? Ketzat hoya yafa shisha diranim. Noisim lemsela. Even if it costs you to finish the job 6 dinners, you pay the workers who did half the job 4. The question is, why do you pay them 4? How could a worker walk off his job just like that? Because the rabbis hold yad poel al elyonin. A day worker has the upper hand. He could quit his job, and the owner, the person that hired him, could be at a loss if it costs more money to hire new workers. That's what the Tanakama holds. We tell the workers, if you want, yigmar malachtam yit l'shnei shalim. If you want to finish the job, you have to take 4. You can take 2 slime. You can't get the new price of 6 dinner, because that was what you originally were hired to finish the job. And if you want to walk off, you want to, throw a strike in the middle of the job, we don't let you get, now we're not paying you more for that. So the Gemara says, Pshita, of course, isn't that simple? So the Gemara says, there is a novelty. The akar avidite, that the cost of labor went up. The imru pe'alim, and the workers said, and the imru pe'alim, and the workers walked off the job. The azal balabayis ufaisinu, the owner came and tried to, negotiate with them. So, and they went back to the job. He said, don't worry about it. I'll take good care of you. That's what the owner said. So they went back and finished the job. They still will only get 4 slime. Because Mao the same, I would have thought, Matzi Amrle, the workers can say, oh, Kimi Paisinan, when you were negotiating with us and you agreed, I dieted the toughest lana igra. Our understanding was that you're gonna increase our wage to what the new going rate is. Kamash Malam teaches you that the owner could say, the Amalahu, Adaite the Trachna Luchubachila Vshtia. I was agreeing to give you better food and drink. In other words, the perquisites of the job, I was going to give you more, but not the wage. Therefore, if they finish the job, they only get, even though it costs 6 dinrim on the open market, they will only get 4. Noisela, noisin lehem sela. So the Gemara says, Pshita. You always give them 4. If they finished a half a day, you give them 4 dinner. Says the Gemara, Pshita, isn't that obvious? That really that there was cheap, that their job, that labor cost 3 to do a half a day's work, and now and he hired them for 4 zuzim for a half a day's work. In the end, when they finished half the job, the price of labor went up to 4 zuz, but he was always 1 zuz ahead of what the going rate was. The bitvei bezuz, the bitvei zuz. Mao the same. I would thought amar lei tvei zuz martlan tvei zuz havlan. For the half a day's labor, you should give us 5 zuz, because the price of labor went up, and when you originally hired us, you were always offering 1 zuz more than the going rate. Ashmalan, so we teach the amalahu, he can say, he amalahu tvei zuz, and when did I say you're getting an extra zuz? The leihave kimlechu, that at that time when the going rate did not reach your rate, hashta kimlechu, but now it caught up to what you charged. I'm not going above the going rate. My price was 4 zuz a seller. That's what I'm paying. But that's the sheet of the Tanakam. Tanakam says a worker could walk off the job. A worker cannot walk off the job. And if he walks off the job, we deduct from his original seller. So now if it costs you 6 dinrim to finish the job, then the original workers will not get 4 dinrim for what they did. We'll deduct. We'll only give them 2 dinrim and pay new workers 6 dinrim to complete the job. So the total of the job will be 8 dinars. Kisava, because Rabbi Daisy hold Yad Poyel ala Tachtoina. The worker has no right to quit. Now, we tell them finish the job and take 2 slime. So the Gemara says Pshita, the price of labor went down. The Ema Balabayas, and the Balabayas wanted to fire them. Palim said, Upaisinu, we want to continue the job. So Mao is saying, I would think the workers could say, Matzah Amalu could say to the owner, Adaiti the Petrisli me agre. He could say, the owner could say, oh, I thought you're gonna come down in your cost. Kamash Malam, the Amrle, they could say, Adaiti the Avdini loch avidit shapita. Our commitment was to give you a very nice job, but we never agreed to go down in our price just because the market price of labor has gone down. Sala, Noisa lechem, Sala. If whatever they did, if they did 4 dinner worth of work, Daisa says you give them 4 dinner worth of work. Says the Gemara Pshita, isn't that simple? That the idea was that he was always offering less, the less than the going rate by one zuz. And then the going rate went down by a zuz. So maybe now the going rate for a half a day's work is 3 zuzim. The owner could say, I was always paying you one less than the going rate. I'm going to give you one less than the going rate, which is now going rate now is 3 zuz, is 3 zuz. I'm going to give you less. I'm going to give you 3 zuz. The Amalei, now the going rate is the Amalei because they said Ki Amalech Batz Zuz. When did we hire you less than a zuz? Do I have a Hasta Kimlach? In other words, I'm sorry, the going rate was 5 zuz, so they agreed to 4 zuz. So now that the going rate went down to 4 zuz, he's going to say, I want to give you only 3 zuz. They tell him no. We believe that the job is worth 4 zuz, and we understood that the going rate is going to come down to 4 zuz, so you can't deduct anything from our original commitment. Okay, so now. So a very important point, and we're going to finish up in 3 minutes over here. We learned an important point is that a worker, according to Rav Doisa, could quit on a job. Could quit. A worker is not allowed to quit on a job. Okay, Rav Yossi says Yad Poil al Tachtoin. A worker cannot. He has the lower hand. A worker is not supposed to quit on a job. Amar Rav said halacha Rav Doisa. The halacha is like Rav Doisa. That means a worker should not quit. Says the Gemara, Mi Amar Rav Hachi. Did Rav say that the worker cannot quit? Amar Rav said, Poil yochel achsavoy afilu b'chatzi hayom. A worker could quit in the middle of the day. He can walk out of a job because you're not supposed to work for anybody. You're supposed to work for yourself or work for Hashem. So Rav seems to say that Yad Poil al Yoinen, a worker could walk off a job. So the answer is, are you going to say, Shanalei Rav Doisa, Ben Schiris lekablones? When do you say a worker can't walk off a job? Is if you're a contractor. If you're a contractor and you contract out a job, you can't walk off. And if you walk off, you lose, any benefit you had is lost. But a worker could walk off the job. And that may be the opinion of Doisa, that he would separate out a poil from a kabbalah. So the Gemara says, does Rav Doisa do that? But Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, if a guy hires a worker and he heard that a family member died or somebody got sick in his family, if he's a hired worker, right? Then you have to give him his full wage. We go to Amabeis. In Kabbalah, you have to give him his full contracting because it's not his fault that he has a family member that got sick. So the Gemara says money. Who is the author of this brisa? If it's Rabbanam, my ear Shamash, the Rabbanah hold Yad Poel al Yoina. In my ear Shamash the honest, who cares if somebody got sick in his family? According to Rabbanan, any contractor, any worker could walk off any job. Honest name, the rabbi said, always the worker wins out over here. So who is the author of the brisa? Elalav, there must be the author of the brisa is Rav Doisa. It's the author of the brisa is Rav Doisa. Ushmam enough, we hear from here that it's only because of an oinus you give him the full wage. But if there wasn't oinus and he just walked off the job, it doesn't matter if you're a worker or a contractor. You're going to lose out all your benefits. So we see from here, Rav Doisa doesn't make a differentiation between a daily worker and a contractor. So how can you reconcile Rav, who paskins like Rav Doisa on one hand, and on the other hand says a day worker can walk off the job with no consequence? Rav Nachman says, first of all, that this brisa is not a question against Rav Doisa. Really, Rav Doisa makes that differentiation. And the author of the brisa is not Rav Doisa. The author of the brisa is everybody. Because even according to Rabbanan, who said, Yad Poel al Yoina, when the Rabbanan say that the worker has the upper hand, only if he doesn't cause a loss. You could always hire other workers. But if it's something that, like, if you don't do it, right, then the whole workers on there's a damage that could happen. If you're not going to do this right now and strike, then there's going to be a complete loss. Oh, so then even Rabbanan will hold Yad Poel is on the bottom, and only if there was an Einus will give you a full wage. But now we learned in the Mishnah. So this extra piece, whoever backs out of a deal, he loses his advantage, right? So Bishla Mechamashan Yada Tasasum Tank Rabbi Yehuda. Ela Kol HaChoyzer B'Yada Tachtoina Latu Yamai. Who's the author of that last part of the Mishnah? That if you back out on any commitment, you lose your advantage. Lav Datu Yapoil Rabbi Yosi. That's coming to conclude. It's Rabbi Doisa, and it's coming to say that even a poil, a day worker, is not allowed to back out of the job. So how could Rav Paskin like Rabbi Doisa and hold by a worker he could back out of a job? Answers the Gemara, yeah, right. Ella Rabbi Doisa Tartikama. Rabbi Doisa says two things. One, both a worker and a contractor cannot back out of a job. But Rav Sovala Kavose. Rav holds Bechada. Rav holds like Rabbi Doisa that a contractor cannot back out of a job. And he argues with him. He argues with him in another matter. He argues with him in another matter that a regular worker could back out of a job. We'll stop over here. The regular worker could back out of a job because a regular worker, you get a leniency because you're supposed to be an Eved of Hashem. And you're not, and therefore we give you the right that if you decide in the middle of the day to just walk off the job, if you're not causing a loss to the owner, you're just causing him now that he has to call up the recruiter to get somebody to finish the job, but it's not a definitive loss to him, then you have a right to do so. But a contractor has no right to do that. Okay.
But it's not, he could not find a man who was